You tap a card against a reader in a coffee shop, and in 2 seconds, an invisible ledger updates on a server you'll never see. Homo sapiens has existed for roughly 300,000 years, a timeline set in 2017 when paleoanthropologist Jean-Jacques Hublin's team dated skull fragments at Jebel Irhoud, Morocco. And for all but a sliver of that span, nothing like the tap in your hand right now existed. Nobody counted anything out loud. Nobody haggled. Coins are almost brand new by comparison. Right now, you probably carry a banking app, a stray receipt, maybe a coin you've never once needed to weigh or bite to check if it's real. Almost none of that machinery would have meant anything for most of human history. No wages, no price tags, no interest quietly compounding while you sleep. So how did ancient humans move goods, share food, and track who owed what to whom for nearly the entire span of human history without money? In 1982, anthropologist Polly Wiesner published her findings on a gift system called Saro, based on years of fieldwork among the Jew-Hawansi people of the Kalahari Desert, near what's now the Namibia-Botswana border. Each person kept a running network of exchange partners, commonly cited around 16, trading ostrich shell beads, arrows, and karosses, the animal skin cloaks used for warmth and carrying infants, sometimes across 100 kilometers of desert. A gift wasn't a sale, and there was no haggling over whether the two objects were equal in value. It was a debt held in someone else's memory, cashed in years later during a drought, when the giver became the one who needed help. Wiesner found that people with more Sharo partners survived hard seasons better than people without them. The network wasn't sentimental. It was survival infrastructure with better manners. Insurance that paid out in favors instead of cash. Everyone assumes trade like this started as barter. Swap a spear for a hide, haggle until it's fair, walk away even. Actually, anthropologist Caroline Humphrey reviewed the evidence in 1985 and found no documented society that ever ran its economy primarily on barter. What came before money wasn't a marketplace. It was a favor and a very long memory. Move from the desert to the world's first cities, and the record gets even stranger. Starting in the 1970s, archaeologist Denise Schmont-Besserat at the University of Texas at Austin cataloged small clay tokens, cones, spheres, discs, recovered from more than 100 sites across the ancient Near East, some dating back roughly 10,000 years. Each shape stood for a fixed quantity, one cone, one measure of grain. Long before anyone poured a coin, people in Mesopotamia were sealing these tokens inside hollow clay envelopes as receipts, marking the outside with the count so nobody had to crack one open just to check a debt. It was accounting, thousands of years before double-entry bookkeeping had a name. Historians consider the system one of the direct ancestors of writing itself. The marks on those envelopes eventually flattened into the first numerals pressed into wet clay, and the numerals became cuneiform, the earliest writing system on Earth. Here's where it gets stranger. In 1922, anthropologist Bronislaw Malinowski published an account of something he'd spent nearly 2 years observing among the Trobriand Islanders of Papua New Guinea, the Kula Ring. Canoes carried shell necklaces clockwise and shell armbands counterclockwise around a loop of islands spanning hundreds of kilometers of open ocean. Nobody kept an item for long. A necklace might travel the entire loop and return to its original owner a decade later, having built alliances and reputations at every stop along the way. Malinowski recorded that entire canoe expeditions were organized, provisioned, and even ritually prepared with magic spells for a voyage whose only cargo was a handful of shell ornaments worth almost nothing as physical objects. The entire point was to give them away again. Status came from how many hands an object had passed through, not from how long you held onto it. Everyone assumes coins came first, and debt followed. Actually, temple and palace records from Mesopotamia, tracking grain and silver owed between households, predate the first known coins by more than 4,000 years. Those coins didn't show up until around 600 BC in the Kingdom of Lydia. Money, it turns out, was invented to formalize a system of owing that already existed. But not every ancient economy needed to write anything down at all. On the Micronesian island of Yap, anthropologist William Henry Furness documented a currency called Rai in 1910. Carved limestone discs, some over 3 meters across and weighing several tons, quarried by hand on Palau, an island more than 400 kilometers away, then hauled home across open ocean on rafts towed by canoe. A round trip that could take weeks and cost lives. Furness recorded a story about one enormous stone that sank to the ocean floor during transport and was never recovered. The island kept trading it anyway. Ownership didn't depend on touching the stone. It depended on everyone agreeing, out loud, on who it belonged to. A fact economist Milton Friedman later used to argue that Yap's primitive money worked on the exact same principle as a modern central bank's gold reserves. Nobody needs to see it, as long as everyone believes the ledger. So pull back from Kalahari deserts and Mesopotamian clay and Pacific canoes, and a pattern shows up in every one of them. None of these were transactions the way you'd recognize one today. Instant, closed, forgotten the second the trade ends. They were open. A Hatzuro gift stayed owed until it was returned. A clay token stayed on the books until the grain arrived. A Kula necklace stayed in motion for years, tying givers and receivers into the same web of reputation. Even a stone sitting at the bottom of the Yap Lagoon stayed spent only because a whole community agreed to remember it that way. Money, when it finally showed up, didn't replace any of that. It just made the memory optional. Before coins, an exchange only worked if both people or their whole community could remember it. Who gave what, who owed what, who was trusted and who wasn't. Money let you skip all of that. You could hand a coin to a total stranger, walk away, never see them again, and the transaction would still count. That's not a footnote to the story. That's the actual invention. Think about that coffee shop again. The tap, the 2 seconds, the stranger behind the counter you'll probably never see again. It works precisely because you don't need to remember them, and they don't need to remember you. That's the trade humanity actually made. Somewhere between Exero gifts and Lydian coins. Obligation for convenience. Ancient economies ran on relationships that had to be maintained, checked in on, repaid, honored, sometimes for a lifetime. Modern money runs on the opposite. Total strangers. Zero obligation. Zero memory required. It's faster. It's also lonelier, in a way most people never stop to name. You can walk through an entire day now, buy your coffee, your groceries, your commute, without a single person needing to remember you exist. Money didn't just replace the ledger in your ancestors' heads. It replaced the reason they had to remember each other at all.